The restaurant was too loud for a Tuesday. Glasses clinked. A blender roared somewhere behind the bar. Laughter burst from a birthday table near the windows where balloons sagged under the ceiling vents. Mark Ellison sat across from his wife, Rachel, watching the candle on their shared dessert tremble in the air conditioning. Their anniversary, 12 years. He had rehearsed what to say in the car, something warm, something steady, something about still choosing her. Rachel's smile had been thin all evening, not angry, not sad, just elsewhere. She kept flipping her napkin over, folding and unfolding the same corner like it held a secret. Mark told himself she was tired. Work, traffic, life. Then her phone lit up, not a buzz, not a soft glow. The full screen flared bright between them on the table. Both of them looked down at the same time. Mark felt his lungs stop before his brain caught up. The name on the screen was his. Mark. His own contact photo. The one from last summer at the lake. Sunglasses. Crooked grin. Rachel moved fast. Too fast. She flipped the phone face down like it had burned her. "Spam," she said, already reaching for her water. Mark didn't move. He stared at the back of the phone, his reflection faint in the black case. His voice came out dry. "Spam uses my picture now." Rachel let out a small laugh that didn't land. You know how numbers get spoofed. Telemarketers do that. She didn't look at him. The candle guttered. Wax tipped sideways. Mark's chest felt tight, like he had run upstairs. "My number didn't ring," he said quietly. Rachel shrugged. Maybe bad signal. Mark slid his own phone out of his pocket. No missed call, no notification. Across the room, a server dropped a tray. Plates shattered. People clapped awkwardly like it was part of the entertainment. Mark's ears rang. "Answer it next time," he said, trying to sound casual and failing. Rachel picked up her fork. "Can we not do this here? Do what?" He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't accused her, hadn't even said the word cheating, but the word sat between them anyway, thick, heavy, breathing. Mark forced a smile at a passing waiter. "More coffee, please." Rachel finally met his eyes. There was fear there, not guilt, not yet, just fear of the conversation itself. "Mark," she said softly, "you're reading too much into one weird call." He nodded. He even nodded convincingly. But something old and ugly stirred in his chest. Something he thought he had outgrown after years of therapy and long talks and promises. The feeling of being the last person to know. He reached for her hand across the table. She hesitated a fraction of a second before letting him hold it. That half-second hurt more than the phone. Outside, a siren wailed past. The restaurant door opened and a gust of cold air slipped in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. Rachel squeezed his fingers like she was reassuring a child. Mark smiled back. But in his mind, one thought looped, sharp and relentless. If my name is calling her, who is she talking to when I'm not there? The drive home was silent except for the turn signal clicking too long before Mark realized he had left it on. Rachel stared out the window, streetlights sliding across her face in slow orange bars. At a red light, Mark glanced at her phone in the cup holder. Face down again. Did that number try again? He asked. No, too fast. The light turned green. Someone behind them honked. At home, the porch light flickered like it always did. Mark made a mental note to change the bulb. He had made that note for 3 weeks now. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser Rachel liked to run at night. Shoes lined the wall. Mail stacked on the console table. Normal, everything normal. Rachel went straight upstairs. "I'm going to shower, long day." Mark nodded. "Yeah, me too." But he didn't move. He stood in the kitchen listening to the pipes groan as water rushed through them. His phone lay on the counter. Silent. Still. He opened his call log again like it might change if he looked at it differently. Nothing. He opened their shared phone plan app. They had combined everything years ago to simplify life. His idea. Transparency builds trust. He scrolled through Rachel's recent calls. One number appeared over and over. Late evenings, mid-afternoons, sometimes just a few seconds, sometimes almost an hour. The contact name was blank. His stomach dipped. He tapped the number. No name, no saved contact, just digits. He told himself there was a logical explanation. Work, a friend, a contractor, anything. Upstairs, the shower shut off. Mark quickly locked his phone and set it down. Rachel came down in sweatpants, hair damp, smelling like eucalyptus soap. She kissed his cheek. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, "just tired." She studied his face like she didn't quite believe him, then curled up on the couch with a blanket. They turned on a show neither of them watched. Mark's mind replayed the dinner table over and over. The light from her screen. His name. "Hey," Rachel said suddenly, eyes still on the TV. "We should plan a weekend away soon." "Yeah, just us. Disconnect. No work, no phones, no phones." The suggestion slid into him sideways. He forced a small smile. "Sure." Her hand found his knee under the blanket. Warm. Familiar. He wanted to relax into it, to believe this was just stress, coincidence, paranoia. Instead, he felt like he was sitting beside someone who had already left the room in ways he couldn't see yet. Later that night, Rachel fell asleep fast, breathing deep and even. Mark lay awake staring at the ceiling fan shadows spinning slowly across the walls. At 2 a.m, he slipped out of bed. Her phone was on the nightstand. He stood there a long time just looking at it. Then he picked it up. Locked. He tried her birthday. Wrong. Their anniversary. Wrong. His own birthday. The screen opened. His chest went cold. He didn't feel victorious. He felt like he had just stepped onto ice he wasn't sure would hold. Mark sat on the edge of the bathtub with Rachel's phone in his hands, the blue light painting his face hollow. He opened her messages first. Nothing obvious. Family group chats, work threads, a friend complaining about daycare. Then he searched his own name. One conversation popped up, not with him, with someone saved as M. His throat tightened. He opened it. The messages were careful, short, mostly during work hours. "M, miss you today." Rachel, "Stop." "M, couldn't help it. You look so good this morning." Rachel, "You're going to get me in trouble?" Mark's pulse thudded in his ears. He scrolled. Photos. Nothing explicit. Just office coffee cups, a steering wheel, a blurry shot of someone's shoes under a desk. But the tone, the intimacy in the pauses between words. Rachel had sent one earlier that evening. Rachel, "Can't talk tonight. Anniversary dinner. M, with him." Rachel, "Yes." I hate that Mark's vision blurred. He scrolled back up to the contact info. The number. The same one from the call logs. His fingers trembled as he copied it and texted it from his own phone. Who is this? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Mark held his breath. The reply came. "You tell me." Mark felt something crack open in his chest. He typed again. "You called my wife during our anniversary dinner." A pause this time. Longer. Then, oh. Mark stood so fast the toilet seat clattered. He stared at the screen. Another message came. "I think you should ask her about Mark." Mark's stomach dropped. "I am Mark," he typed. "No, you're the husband, I'm Mark." The room tilted. His own name suddenly felt like it didn't belong to him anymore. He didn't reply. He couldn't. Instead, he walked back into the bedroom and looked at Rachel, sleeping on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek like she had since college. He saw 2 versions of her at once. The woman who cried when their dog died. The woman who texted another man during dinner. His phone buzzed again. One last message. "I didn't know she was still with you." Mark turned off the screen. He sat on the floor beside the bed until dawn, back against the wall, staring at nothing. Around 5:30, Rachel stirred. She opened her eyes and saw him there. "Mark," she mumbled. "Why are you on the floor?" He looked up at her. For the first time in 12 years, he didn't know which version of himself was about to answer. Rachel propped herself up on one elbow, hair a mess, eyes still heavy with sleep. "What's wrong?" she asked. Mark stood slowly. His legs felt stiff like he had aged 20 years overnight. "Who's Mark?" he asked. She blinked. "You." He held up her phone, her face drained of color. "I unlocked it," he said, "with my birthday." Rachel sat up fully now. "You went through my phone." "Who is Mark?" She swung her legs off the bed. "That's not the point. It's exactly the point." Her voice sharpened. "You invaded my privacy." Mark let out a short, broken laugh. "You text another man during our anniversary dinner and I'm the one crossing lines." Rachel stood. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Silence. The house creaked as the heater kicked on. Rachel crossed her arms. Defensive, closed. "He's just someone I talk to. You tell him you miss him. That doesn't mean. You tell him you looked good that morning." She pressed her lips together. Mark's voice dropped. "He called you last night." "With my name." Rachel flinched. "He told me to ask you about Mark," Mark continued. "He thinks I'm the other guy." Rachel sat back down hard on the bed like her knees gave out. Mark watched her crumble and hated that part of himself still wanted to comfort her. "How long?" he asked quietly. She covered her face. "I don't know. A few months, he repeated. "It didn't start physical," she said quickly. "We just talked." He listened. Mark felt heat rise in his chest. "I don't listen." "You fix," she said. "You solve. You don't sit in the mess with me." The words landed, sharp and unfair and maybe partly true. "And so, you found someone who would," he said. Rachel nodded once, tears slipping through her fingers. "Did you sleep with him?" A long pause. "Yes." The word barely existed in the air before Mark turned away. He walked to the window and stared at the neighbor's yard. A sprinkler ticked back and forth over brown winter grass. "How many times?" he asked. "I don't want to hurt you more. That's not an answer." She whispered a number. It felt like a punch to the throat. Mark closed his eyes. He thought he would scream. Break something. Collapse. Instead, he just felt hollow. Like someone had quietly removed the center of his life and left the shape behind. "Do you love him?" he asked. Rachel looked up at him, eyes red. "I don't know. That hurt worse than yes." Down the street, a school bus groaned to a stop. Kids laughed, backpacks bouncing. Life went on. Inside the bedroom, a marriage quietly split down the middle, and neither of them yet understood how deep the crack really ran. Mark didn't go to work. He told his boss he had food poisoning, which was technically true if betrayal counted as something you swallowed and couldn't digest. Rachel stayed in the bedroom most of the morning. He heard her moving, drawers opening, a quiet sob that cut off like she was biting it back. Mark sat at the kitchen table and stared at a mug of coffee that went cold. He tried to make his mind do the logical thing. Make a plan, call a lawyer, separate accounts, protect himself. Instead, his body did something humiliating and childish. His hands started shaking so hard the mug rattled on the table. He stood up fast, walked to the sink and threw up. Not gracefully, not quietly. He gripped the edge of the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the world, gagging until there was nothing but bitter spit. When it finally stopped, he turned on the faucet and splashed water on his face. His reflection in the window over the sink looked like a stranger. Eyes bloodshot. Hair sticking up. A man who had lost not just his wife but his posture, his dignity, his sense of control. He hated that. He hated her for making him this. He hated himself for letting her. Upstairs, Rachel came down slowly, dressed for work. Blazer, neutral makeup, hair pulled back. She looked like someone who could walk into a meeting and run it. She looked normal. Mark felt a surge of anger so hot it scared him. "How do you just put on a blazer?" he asked. Rachel paused at the bottom step. "I have to go to him." Her eyes flicked away. "No," Mark laughed once. "So you're going to work, act fine, and I'm supposed to what? Sit here and pretend my chest isn't splitting open?" Rachel came into the kitchen, stopping a few feet away like she didn't trust the air between them. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Mark's voice broke. "Like this? Like I caught you because your phone betrayed you at our anniversary dinner." Rachel's face twisted. "Please don't say it like that." "Why not? It sounds uglier when it's true." Tears slid down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the side of her hand. Efficient, controlled. Mark hated that too. "Is he married?" Mark asked. Rachel hesitated. There it was again, that pause that told him everything. Mark leaned forward on the table. "Is he married?" Rachel whispered, "Yes." Mark's stomach turned. "So you didn't just hurt me," Mark said. "You helped him hurt someone else." Rachel flinched. "It wasn't like I was planning to destroy another family, but you didn't mind joining the demolition crew." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. Mark watched her struggling for words and felt the sick satisfaction of seeing her cornered. And then another feeling hit him, sharp and unexpected. Fear. Because if she could do this, if she could live 2 lives and still look like Rachel, then he didn't know what else she was capable of. He stood and walked past her toward the living room. His phone lay on the couch where he had dropped it last night. He picked it up and opened the messages from the other Mark. No new texts. He stared at the blank screen, wondering if that man was sitting somewhere right now, reading this situation like entertainment. Rachel spoke behind him, voice shaking. "Mark, I can end it." Mark didn't turn around. "You already did. I mean, with him," she said quickly. "I can block him." "I can." Mark spun around, anger erupting. "Don't you get it? Blocking him doesn't unbreak what you broke." Rachel covered her mouth, crying harder now. Mark stood there breathing hard, and he realized with a strange clarity that he looked like the villain in his own home. That scared him. He didn't want to become the man who screamed, who threatened, who punished. But he also couldn't be the man who swallowed it and smiled. He walked back into the kitchen, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Rachel asked. Mark's voice came out low. "I'm going to find out who he is." Rachel's eyes widened. "Mark, please don't. You'll do something you regret." Mark paused with his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at her. Really looked. Rachel was terrified, not of losing him, of what would happen if the truth left their private walls. Mark felt something settle in him like a stone. If she was scared of the truth going public, maybe the truth was the only leverage he had left. "I already regret everything," he said, and walked out. Mark drove without thinking, ending up in the parking lot of Rachel's office building downtown. A glass tower with a lobby that smelled like polished stone and expensive air freshener. He sat in his car watching people in business clothes swipe badges and step through revolving doors. Rachel worked in marketing for a regional health network. Not glamorous, but stable, respectable, the kind of job her mother bragged about at family dinners. Mark had always been the quieter one, the operations guy, the behind-the-scenes manager at a logistics company that handled freight contracts and vendor compliance. Rachel was the one people noticed. Mark watched her from a distance as she walked up the sidewalk. She didn't look back. She didn't text him. She just moved forward like this morning hadn't happened. Mark's throat burned. He got out of his car and followed, staying far enough back to pretend he wasn't. At the entrance, Rachel paused when someone called her name. A man stepped into her path. Mid-30s. Sharp haircut. A watch that caught the sunlight. Confident posture. Rachel's whole face changed. Not guilt. Relief. Like seeing him eased something inside her. Mark felt something tear inside his chest. The man leaned in too close and said something that made Rachel laugh. A real laugh. Mark stood frozen across the street, watching his wife laugh with the man who had been wearing Mark's name in her phone. A commuter bumped Mark's shoulder, muttering an apology without looking. Mark barely heard it. The man touched Rachel's elbow lightly, guiding her toward the door. A gesture that looked casual to strangers. But Mark saw the ownership in it. Rachel glanced down at her phone, then up at the man again. She looked nervous now. The man said something else. Rachel's smile faded. She nodded. Then, before they went inside, he did something small that made Mark's blood run cold. He kissed her. Not a full kiss, not a movie kiss, a quick, familiar press of lips to her cheek, like this was normal, like he belonged there. Rachel didn't pull away. Mark's vision narrowed. His body moved before his brain gave permission. He crossed the street, walking fast. Rachel saw him when he was only a few steps away. Her face went white. The man turned, following her gaze. He looked Mark up and down with a smile that wasn't friendly. "Hey," the man said, voice calm. "You must be." Mark cut him off. "Don't." Rachel stepped between them. "Mark, please, not here, not here." The words were the knife twist, because it meant there were places she thought this was acceptable and places she didn't. Mark's voice shook. "So, this is him." The man's smile widened. "I guess." Rachel whispered, "Stop." Mark looked at Rachel. "You told me you weren't going to him." Rachel's eyes filled with tears again, but she kept her voice low. "I have to work. I can't lose my job." Mark let out a raw laugh. "You were willing to lose your husband, though." People were slowing down, noticing. A woman in heels glanced over her shoulder. A security guard shifted in the lobby. Rachel's cheeks flushed with shame. Mark felt a wave of satisfaction and disgust at himself for it. The man stepped closer, too confident. "Look, man, I didn't know." Mark snapped, "Don't lie." The man's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." Mark's hands clenched. He wanted to hit him. He wanted to do the simple, stupid thing. Instead, he did something uglier. He looked at Rachel and said, loud enough for the nearest people to hear, "So you cheat on me and bring him to your office like he's a coworker." Rachel flinched like he slapped her. The security guard started walking toward them. Rachel grabbed Mark's arm, nails digging in. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "You're humiliating me." Mark's chest heaved. He stared at her face, the fear, the shame. And it hit him. This was what she cared about. The public image, the clean story, the version of Rachel everyone admired. Mark's voice dropped to something almost quiet. "Good." Rachel's eyes widened. Mark turned and walked away. Behind him he heard Rachel sob once, quick and strangled. He didn't stop. In the car his hands shook so badly he had to sit for a full minute before he could turn the key. He didn't feel like a winner. He felt like a man who had just set fire to his own house because he didn't know how else to stay warm. Mark went back home and did the thing he should have done first. He opened the shared phone plan records again. Then he opened their bank statements. Not because he wanted to punish Rachel, because his brain needed something solid. Numbers, patterns, proof. It was easier than sitting with the pain. He poured himself another coffee, even though his stomach protested, and started scrolling through transactions. Dinner charges, gas, grocery stores, then a hotel. A boutique place 20 minutes from downtown. 2 nights. Not cheap. The charge wasn't on Rachel's card, it was on their joint account. Mark stared at the line item until his eyes burned. He clicked the details. The dates matched one of Rachel's work conferences. Mark felt his throat close. He scrolled more. A jewelry store. Not a big chain. A small local place. He remembered Rachel wearing a new necklace 2 months ago. She had said it was a gift from her team for hitting a campaign milestone. Mark had believed her. He zoomed in on the receipt image attached to the transaction. It showed 2 items. 1 necklace and a men's watch. Mark's hands went cold. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the kitchen ceiling like it might explain how his life had turned into a spreadsheet of lies. Then his phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. "Other Mark, you showed up." Mark's heart pounded. Mark typed with shaking fingers. "Who are you?" The reply came after a pause. "Evan." Mark stared at the name. It didn't feel real. It felt like a label on a file, a villain in a story. Mark typed again. "Evan what?" "Evan. Doesn't matter." Mark's anger surged. He typed, "Your wife. What's her name?" A long pause, then, "Lena." Mark felt a jolt. He didn't know Alina. Evan's wife wasn't someone Mark had met at barbecues or company events. She was someone out there living her life, unaware her husband was borrowing another man's name to call a married woman during an anniversary dinner. Mark's fingers hovered. He typed slowly, "She doesn't know." "Evan, don't do that." Mark's stomach twisted. "Don't do that," like Mark was the dangerous one. Mark typed, "You didn't know she was still with me, that's what you said. So what did she tell you?" "Evan, that you were separated." Mark read it twice, separated. So Rachel hadn't just cheated, she had rewritten their marriage into something convenient. Mark typed, "How long have you been seeing her?" "Evan, since spring?" Mark's jaw clenched. Spring meant baseball season. Their neighbors' cookouts, Rachel's bright sundresses, the nights she said she was tired and went to bed early. Mark typed, "Where do you meet?" "Evan." "Stop," Mark wrote back. "You used my name. You called her with my contact. That's not an accident." "Why?" Evan didn't reply for almost 5 minutes. Mark watched the screen like it was a ticking bomb. Finally, a message came. "Because my wife checks my phone. If she sees a name she doesn't know, she asks questions. If she sees Mark, she thinks it's work." Mark's blood ran cold. So his name wasn't just a coincidence. His name was camouflage. Mark typed, "What do you do for work?" Another pause. "Evan." "Finance." Mark stared at the word. Finance could mean anything. Then Evan sent a second message. "Look, I'm not proud of it, but don't contact my wife. You'll blow up more than you think." Mark's mind snagged on the phrase, "more than you think." Like there was more at stake than embarrassment. Mark put his phone down and stared at the bank statements again. Hotel, jewelry, and then something else. A transfer. $5,000 from their joint account to an account Mark didn't recognize. The memo line was blank. Mark's skin prickled. Rachel hadn't just lied with words. She had used their life like a wallet. Mark thought about the quiet version of himself. The one who trusted. The one who came home early with takeout when Rachel said she had a rough day. He remembered Rachel's voice in bed last month, soft and tired. "We're fine, Mark. We're good." Mark's eyes stung. He whispered to the empty kitchen, "No, we weren't." He opened his laptop and started making a folder. Screenshots, statements, call logs, timestamps, every receipt. If Rachel wanted to live in stories, Mark would build a story she couldn't rewrite. One with proof. That Friday, Rachel's parents hosted dinner. It had been on the calendar for weeks, a family night. Rachel's mom's pot roast. Her dad's jokes that always landed a second too late. Rachel texted Mark that morning, "Please don't do anything. My parents can't handle this." Mark read the message 3 times. He almost didn't go. But there was something in him now that wanted the pressure of witnesses, not for revenge, for reality. Rachel arrived at the house separately. Mark drove alone, knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he walked in, Rachel's mother, Diane Caldwell, wrapped him in a hug that smelled like perfume and onions. "There's my son," she said, as if saying it could make it true. Rachel's father, Tom, slapped Mark on the back. "Anniversary week, huh? You kids still like each other." Mark smiled automatically, a practiced mask. Rachel stood by the kitchen island, hands clasped tight, eyes pleading. Mark didn't nod back. Dinner started normal. Pot roast, mashed potatoes. Diane talking about her neighbor's new patio. Mark watched Rachel's face as she laughed at her father's jokes. She looked like the woman he married. It made Mark feel insane, like he was the only one seeing the rot under the paint. Halfway through, Diane asked, "Oh, when are you two finally going to buy a bigger place? You need room if you're going to give me grandbabies." Rachel's fork paused. Mark felt his chest tighten. They had tried for a baby for 2 years. Quietly, without telling anyone, 2 miscarriages. Rachel had cried in Mark's arms both times, shaking like a child. And now she had been sleeping with someone else since spring. Mark's stomach turned. Rachel forced a smile. "Mom." Mark's voice slipped out before he could stop it. "We're not having babies." The table went quiet. Diane blinked. "What?" Rachel's eyes shot to Mark, panic rising. "Mark, don't." Tom frowned. "What do you mean you're not?" Mark looked down at his plate. His hands were shaking again. This was the moment he should have stayed calm, should have waited, should have handled it privately, but he was tired of carrying the weight alone. He looked up at Diane and Tom, his voice raw. "Rachel's been having an affair." Silence exploded. Diane's face went stiff like stone. Tom's jaw dropped. Rachel stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Mark." Diane's voice came sharp. "Rachel, is that true?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Tom slammed his hand on the table. "Say it. Is it true?" Rachel's lips trembled. She whispered, "Yes." Diane made a sound like she had been punched. Tom stood up, pacing like he was trying not to explode. "With who?" Rachel shook her head, crying harder. "Please." Mark's throat burned. He didn't want to say the name. He didn't want to make it even more real. But then Rachel said something that made Mark's blood go cold. "It's not just me," she cried. "Mark isn't perfect either." Diane snapped. "What does that mean?" Rachel wiped her face with shaking hands. "He controls everything. Money, decisions. I feel like I'm drowning in his life." Mark stared at her. She was already rewriting it, already trying to shift blame to survive. Tom pointed at Mark. "Is that true? You control her." Mark felt a hot flash of shame. Not because it was true, because he suddenly realized how easy it would be for Rachel to paint him as the villain. And people would believe her, because she'd looked so believable when she cried. Mark's voice came out low and shaking. "I didn't control her. I trusted her." Rachel sobbed. "I was lonely." Diane turned away, covering her mouth, eyes wet. Tom stared at Rachel like he didn't recognize his daughter. Mark felt the room closing in. This was humiliation for Rachel, yes, but it was also humiliation for him, being the husband at the table while his wife admitted she had stepped outside their marriage, being the man who couldn't keep his life intact even in front of people who loved him. Mark pushed his chair back slowly. Rachel reached for him. "Mark, wait." He stepped away. "Don't touch me." Rachel froze. Mark looked at Diane and Tom. His voice was quiet. "I'm sorry you had to hear it like this." Diane whispered, "Mark." He shook his head. "I can't do this tonight." He walked out into the cold air. In his car, he finally broke. Not a dignified tear, a full-body sob that hit him like a wave, shaking his shoulders, fogging up the windshield. He punched the steering wheel once, then again, then rested his forehead against it. Weak, ugly, out of control. And, for the first time since this started, Mark admitted the thing he hadn't allowed himself to say. He didn't just feel betrayed. He felt disposable. The house felt different when Mark came back that night. Not louder, not emptier, just unfamiliar, like he was walking through a staged version of his own life. Rachel wasn't home. Her car was gone. No note, no text. Mark didn't chase her. He sat at the kitchen table again, laptop open, bank statements glowing in the dim light. He went further back. Not months, years. At first, everything looked normal. Mortgage, utilities, insurance. Then, small things began to stand out. Transfers that didn't match any known account. Round numbers. Quiet, infrequent. Not shopping, not bills, movement. Mark made a list, dates, amounts, destination accounts. Then he opened the business documents from his own job. Vendor payment schedules. Contract partners. Subsidiary names. Something tickled at the edge of his brain. One of the receiving accounts from Rachel's transfers shared the same bank as a consulting firm his company had flagged last quarter during an internal audit. A shell vendor. They'd been investigating inflated service invoices routed through marketing budgets in several regional healthcare networks. Mark's pulse slowed. Rachel worked in marketing. He pulled up the audit notes. The suspected fraud involved padded campaign costs, fake digital placements, and outside consultants siphoning funds. One of the healthcare networks listed was Rachel's employer. Mark leaned back slowly. His marriage wasn't just cracked. It was sitting on top of something rotten. He opened Rachel's LinkedIn profile. Recent post. Proud of the work our team is doing to expand patient outreach this quarter. Lots of likes, comments, applause. Mark scrolled through the audit file again. A name jumped out. Evan Mercer, financial compliance analyst. Same first name, same industry, same city. Mark's heart thudded once, heavy. He opened the employee directory from the public site. Evan Mercer, finance department. Rachel's company. Mark stared at the screen. The affair wasn't random. It grew in the same building. Same budgets. Same flow of money. He checked the $5,000 transfer again. The receiving account name was abbreviated, EM Consulting. Mark's jaw tightened. He wasn't just the husband. He was the operations manager who specialized in vendor fraud detection. And his wife had unknowingly built her secret life right on top of his professional skill set. Mark didn't feel powerful. He felt sick. Because if he pulled this thread, Rachel's job wouldn't just be embarrassing. It could become criminal. His phone buzzed. "Rachel, can we talk?" Mark stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Tomorrow. Home." 7, she replied almost instantly. "Okay, no heart, no apology, just logistics." Mark closed the laptop. For the first time since dinner night, his breathing felt even. Not calm, focused. The pain was still there, sharp and alive, but now it had structure. Rachel hadn't just stepped outside their marriage. She might have stepped into something that could burn her entire career down. Mark whispered to the quiet kitchen, "What did you get yourself into?" And for the first time, the question wasn't only about love. Rachel arrived at 6:58. Mark noticed the detail automatically. 2 minutes early, controlled, prepared. She stood in the doorway like a guest. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Mark stepped aside. She walked into the living room but didn't sit until he did. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. Rachel spoke first. "I ended it with him." Mark didn't react. "When?" "Today, after work." "Because you wanted to or because you're scared?" Her mouth tightened. "Both." Mark nodded once. "Good." Rachel blinked. She hadn't expected agreement. Mark slid a folder across the coffee table. Printed bank statements. Highlighted transfers. Rachel looked down, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she whispered. "Money," Mark said. "Ours. Going somewhere." Rachel shook her head. "I don't." "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't lie again. I don't have space for another version of the story." Her eyes filled. It wasn't like that. Mark leaned forward. "Then tell me what it was like." Rachel's hands trembled. "Evan said there was a consulting opportunity, just temporary, extra income. No one would get hurt." Mark's voice stayed calm, which scared her more. "So you moved money." "It wasn't stealing," she said quickly. "It was adjusting campaign budgets, shifting vendor allocations." He said the company wastes millions. Mark exhaled slowly. Rachel, that's fraud. She covered her face. I know how much. I don't know exactly, not just me, others too. It's a system. Mark felt ice settle in his veins. And the 5,000, he asked. Rachel's voice broke. That was my cut. The word landed like a gunshot. Mark stared at her. Not because of the amount, because she had crossed a line that couldn't be explained away by loneliness. You risked prison, he said quietly. For him. Rachel shook her head hard. It wasn't for him. I was drowning at work. Targets, pressure, layoffs coming. He said this was protection, that the leadership was doing worse. Mark laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. So you cheated on your husband and your employer at the same time. Rachel sobbed. I didn't plan to fall for him, but you did. She nodded. Mark stood and walked to the window. Outside, a neighbor walked a dog. Normal life. Porch lights. Evening news flickering in windows. Inside, his marriage was tangled with corporate fraud. Does his wife know? Mark asked. Rachel shook her head violently. No. Please don't tell her. Mark turned slowly. You're worried about her now. Rachel whispered, I'm worried about everything. Mark believed that. For the first time, Rachel didn't look like someone managing a lie. She looked like someone who had lost control of the story she thought she could handle. Mark walked back and sat down. His voice was steady. Here's what's going to happen. Rachel's eyes lifted, terrified. I'm not reporting anything yet, he said. Not to your company, not to the police. She let out a shaking breath. Because if this blows up suddenly, you go down with him, hard. Tears streamed down her face. Why are you helping me? Mark held her gaze. I'm not helping you, he said. I'm protecting the truth. Rachel didn't understand. Mark continued, You're going to write everything down. Every transfer, every conversation, every person involved. Rachel's voice cracked. That could destroy me. Mark nodded. It already has. She stared at him like she was seeing a different man. Not the quiet fixer. Not the husband she thought she could outgrow. Someone colder. Sharper. Someone who had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. And Evan, she whispered. Mark's jaw tightened. Evan doesn't get to walk away clean. Rachel closed her eyes. For the first time, she realized something terrifying. Mark wasn't chasing revenge. He was building a record, and records don't scream, they don't fight, they just exist. And when the time comes, they ruin people quietly. After Rachel went upstairs to start writing, Mark stayed on the couch. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from rage, from the weight of what he now knew. Affair was one thing. Crime was another. He pressed his palms into his eyes until stars burst behind them. He didn't feel strong. He felt like a man holding a live wire, afraid to drop it and afraid to keep holding it. Upstairs, he could hear Rachel moving around, drawers opening, papers shuffling. The sound of someone trying to outrun consequences with organization. Mark's phone buzzed. Evan, we need to talk. Mark stared at the message. His first instinct was to throw the phone across the room. Instead, he typed, You're right. They met in a coffee shop parking lot 20 minutes later. Neutral ground. Evan got out of a dark sedan, dressed like nothing in his life was on fire. Mark stayed by his own car. No handshake, no greeting. Evan spoke first. Rachel told me, you know. Mark nodded. About everything. Evan's jaw tightened. Look, this got out of hand. Mark let out a short breath. You think? Evan ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to involve feelings. Or spouses. Or this. Mark studied him. This was the man who had borrowed his name. Shared his wife. Moved money through the same system Mark professionally protected. You told her it was safe, Mark said. Evan shrugged weakly. It is, if nobody talks. Mark stared at him. You really believe that? Evan's confidence flickered. Mark stepped closer. "You're in finance compliance," Mark said. "You know audits don't stay buried forever." Evan's face went still. Mark continued, voice low and precise. "I work in vendor fraud detection. I've already matched transfers." Evan's breath caught. "You're bluffing," he said. Mark held his gaze. "Try me." Silence stretched between them. Evan looked suddenly smaller, less polished. "What do you want?" Evan asked. There it was, not apology, negotiation. Mark surprised himself with the answer. "I want the truth documented." Evan blinked. "That's it, for now." Evan swallowed. "If this comes out, we both lose everything." Mark nodded. "I already did." The words hit harder than he expected, because they were true. Evan looked away first. "You think you're the only one hurting?" Evan muttered. "You think I wanted this." Mark's voice sharpened. "You don't get to talk about hurt." Evan flinched. Mark stepped back. "You're going to write a statement. Timeline. Transactions. Everyone involved." Evan stared at him. "Are you insane? That's evidence." "Yes," Mark said. Evan's voice dropped to a whisper. "You could ruin Rachel." Mark didn't look away. "She ruined herself." Evan searched Mark's face for anger, for chaos, for something he could manipulate. He found none. Just exhaustion and quiet certainty. "You're not trying to save your marriage," Evan said slowly. Mark shook his head once. "I'm trying to stop the bleeding," he said. Evan didn't answer, because deep down he understood. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about consequences. And Mark, the man everyone overlooked, had quietly become the most dangerous person in the story. Sunday morning arrived gray and still. Rachel came downstairs with swollen eyes and a stack of papers. She set them on the table like an offering. Mark read in silence. Names, dates, accounts, amounts, other employees. Supervisors who looked the other way. It was bigger than he thought. Rachel watched his face the whole time. "Are you going to turn it in?" she asked finally. Mark didn't answer right away. He looked at the woman across from him, not the villain, not the victim. A flawed, frightened human being who had made a series of selfish, desperate choices. "I don't know yet," he said. Rachel nodded slowly. "Do you still hate me?" Mark considered. "No," he said honestly. "I don't hate you." Tears slid down her face. "That would be easier," he added. Rachel let out a broken laugh. They sat there in the quiet kitchen. Two people who had once been a team, now bound together by damage instead of love. Mark finally spoke. "I'm filing for separation." Rachel closed her eyes and nodded. She had expected that. "But I'm also giving you a chance to come forward voluntarily," he continued. Her eyes snapped open. "Self-report." "Yes." Rachel's voice shook. "I could lose everything." Mark met her gaze. "You already almost did. The difference is whether you face it or wait to be exposed." Rachel looked at the papers again. "This is your decision," Mark said. "I won't protect a lie, but I won't destroy you without giving you the chance to choose honesty," Rachel cried quietly. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just grief. For her marriage, her career, the version of herself she thought she was. Mark stood and walked to the sink. He watched water run over his hands. They still trembled. He was not powerful. He was not victorious. He was a man who had been humiliated, betrayed, and dragged through the mud. But he had done one thing differently than before. He had stopped pretending. Behind him, Rachel whispered, "I'll report it." Mark closed his eyes briefly. Not relief, not joy, just the dull, heavy feeling of a wound being cleaned. It hurt, but it might heal. Later that afternoon, Mark sat alone on the back porch. Cold air, distant traffic, a neighbor mowing their lawn like the world hadn't shifted. His phone buzzed, a message from Evan. "Rachel told me. I'm going in too." Mark stared at the screen. No anger, no triumph. Just a strange, quiet sadness. He typed back, "Okay." He set the phone down and looked out at the gray sky. 12 years of marriage had ended, not with screaming, not with revenge, but with paperwork and truth. Messy, human, real. Mark let out a long breath he felt like he had been holding for weeks. He wasn't whole, he wasn't okay, but for the first time since the restaurant, he wasn't lost either. And sometimes that was enough. The house echoed once Rachel moved out. Not dramatically, just small absences. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coffee mug didn't sit in the drying rack. The lavender diffuser stayed empty on their nights. Mark noticed everything. He also noticed how his body slowly stopped bracing for impact. No more late-night phone glow. No more wondering who she was texting while sitting 3 feet away. Silence, it turned out, had weight, but it also had shape. And after a while, shape became space. Rachel moved into a short-term rental across town. They spoke only through email now, mostly about logistics, lawyers, accounts, the house. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic scenes. Just the strange politeness of two people handling the paperwork of a shared past. Rachel followed through. She reported everything to her company's internal compliance office. Within a week, Evan was suspended. Within 2, investigators contacted Rachel again. Mark never asked for details. She volunteered very little, but one night she sent a message that was only 1 sentence. I told them everything, even the parts that made me look worst. Mark read it twice. Then he replied, "Thank you for telling the truth." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was the most honest thing he had. Work changed too. Mark found it harder to sit through meetings where executives talked about risk exposure like it was an abstract game. He saw faces now. Lies had weight. Fraud had families attached to it. One afternoon, his boss called him into the office. "We've been asked to consult on an external healthcare audit," she said. "Different company, but similar patterns to what you've handled before." Mark paused. "Are you okay taking it?" she asked carefully. "If it's too close to home." Mark thought about Rachel, about the folder of evidence, about the night on the kitchen floor when his whole life tilted. "I can do it," he said, and he meant it. Because this time, he wasn't just chasing numbers. He understood what was at stake. Months passed. The divorce finalized quietly. Rachel didn't fight for the house. Mark didn't ask for more than what was fair. At the courthouse, they sat on opposite sides of the hallway bench, not touching. Rachel looked thinner, tired, older in ways that had nothing to do with age. Mark felt it too. When their case was called, they stood side by side in front of a judge who had seen hundreds of endings that week alone. "Do you both agree to these terms?" the judge asked. "Yes," Mark said. Rachel's voice trembled, but she nodded. "Yes." Just like that, 12 years became a signature. Outside, Rachel stopped him before he reached his car. "Mark?" she said. He turned. "I'm sorry," she said again, like she needed to say it in daylight, not just through tears at night. Mark studied her face. He believed her. "I know," he said. They stood there awkwardly. Two people who had once known each other's smallest habits, now unsure whether a hug would heal or hurt. Rachel stepped back first. "I hope you find something better," she said. Mark nodded. "I hope you become someone you don't have to hide." She flinched, then gave a small, sad smile. "Goodbye, Mark." "Goodbye, Rachel." She walked away. Mark watched until she got into her car and drove off. He didn't chase her. He didn't collapse. He just stood there, breathing, letting the finality settle into his bones. That night, Mark sat alone on the back porch again. Same chair, same quiet street, but the air felt different, not heavy, open. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, then he opened it. "Hi, you don't know me. My name is Lena. I'm Evan's wife." Mark's chest tightened. The message continued. "Rachel gave my number to the investigators. They told me you helped push the truth out. I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't know what was happening, but I do now." Mark stared at the screen for a long time. Then he typed back, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she'd replied. "Me too, but I'd rather know than live in a lie." Mark looked out at the darkening sky. He understood that. More than he ever wanted to. He set the phone down and leaned back in the chair. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned him. He had lost a marriage. He had lost the version of his life he thought was guaranteed, but he had kept something else. His ability to face the truth even when it humiliated him, even when it broke him. A breeze moved through the trees, cool against his skin. Mark closed his eyes and let it wash over him. Not healed, not finished, but moving forward. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. If this story hit you in the gut, you're not alone. Betrayal doesn't always explode loudly. Sometimes it starts with one small moment, one name on a screen, one lie that feels easier than the truth. So, I want to ask you something real. If you were in Mark's place, would you have exposed everything, or would you have walked away in silence? Tell me in the comments, I read them. And your perspective might help someone else who's living through something like this right now. If you believe truth matters, even when it hurts, subscribe to FinalText. Because here, we don't tell fairy tales. We tell the stories people are afraid to admit are real. I'll see you in the next one.